and welcome to Diecast Restos for a long overdue custom restoration. This sorry looking thing is an MC toy Ford Sierra XR4i. It is marked on the plastic base as a Ford, but the bonnet tampos read Merkur XR4Ti. So today, instead of focusing too squarely on the history of the Sierra, I will delve into the North American Merkur instead, since MC Toy looked like they wanted to cover more markets. Here is this casting in better shape. And this is a Merkur XR4Ti in the exact specification I'll be designing my custom around. Before I go too far, once I break into the casting, you'll see just how hopeless a shape this thing is in. The suspension piece is one of the rustiest I've ever seen. It's really dirty as well. The interior piece is filthy, as is the transparency, which includes the headlights. The casting and plastic base moulding are a virtually identical carbon copy of Matchbox's own MB120 Sierra XR4i, which they produced from 1983 to 1993. MC Toy's version likely followed shortly after this, but I cannot find any manufacturing dates to verify. You might note the broken wheel arches on the base moulding. This was shared with the Matchbox version, but they looked particularly brittle on this car. As you'll see later, I break the remains off and smooth them over. They won't be missed since the body will be black anyway. The Merkur brand was created by Ford in 1983 to target buyers of European executive cars in North America. The XR4Ti was one of only 2 cars to be sold under the brand. It was an adaptive captive import of Ford of Europe's German division Sierra XR4i. The name Merkur is the German translation of Mercury, through whose dealers the new car would be sold. I've talked at length about the Sierra origins and its jelly mould design in my Corgi Ford Sierra restoration some time back. However, the XR4i and Ti came fitted with the distinctive biplane spoiler at the rear, which significantly aided the low drag ratio of the car. Despite the near identical look to the Sierra, the XR4Ti had over 850 different parts, but the biggest difference is the engine. This is reflected by the T in the name, as the Merkur is turbocharged. Instead of the 2.8 litre Cologne V6, Ford opted to use the Pinto 4-cylinder turbocharged 2.3 litre unit instead. The 5-speed manual produced 170 horsepower, with the 3-speed automatic sending 140 horsepower to the rear wheels. This was compared to the European's 148 horsepower. The plan to bring the XR4i to North America was spearheaded by Bob Lutz, Vice President of Ford, who had been overseeing Ford's European operations when the Sierra launched in 1982. Assembly of the America-bound XR4Ti was contracted out to German firm Karmann. These were mostly hand-built. On its arrival in the US, prices started at $16,500. Sales targets were never met. Ford had projected sales of 16 to 20,000 units per year. In the first 2 years, from 1985, 25,000 cars were sold. Just take a moment to look at this dirty water. Horrific. These custom resin wheels are based on the later Sierra Sapphire Cosworth alloys. They are perhaps not period specific to this car, but will give it an OEM feel. After 1986, sales of the Merkur XR4Ti dropped significantly. In mid-1987, the only other vehicle to bear the Merkur name, the Scorpio, launched, targeting the executive sedan market. This was largely unchanged as it was sold directly from the German production line. By 1988, the Merkur name was dropped and the XR4Ti and Scorpio were sold by model names only. This did little to plump sales. The final year came for the XR4Ti in 1989, with only 3,000 cars sold. This was partially due to the weak dollar against the Deutschmark. Later that year, the Scorpio was also discontinued for the North America market. The XR4Ti is remembered as a bit of a disaster among some circles, yet seems fairly well viewed in others. Certainly in the UK and Europe, the XR4i has a reasonable legacy, but it was always overshadowed by the monstrous Sierra RS Cosworth. Speaking of Cosworth, here are the rims meeting their rubber for the first time. I'll leave a link to the source in the description. They look absolutely stunning, I think. This window piece has yellowed a bit, but hopefully some polishing will improve that. I'm a big fan of glass that incorporates the headlights. It makes the whole casting look far more realistic, particularly on these big sunken lamps found on the Sierra. You'll note I've drawn a big red perimeter around the base. The XR4Ti and Sierra alike had this reflective strip applied. On the black casting on black plastic, I will, I hope, break up the solid colour. The slightly dull finish of my paint pen is quite reflective of the reflector's look. Orange and red Sharpies are used over the chrome base for the tail lights and turn signals, as well as a spot of blue for the Ford oval. I've again used some Humbrol clear on the windscreen, still testing it out on various castings to see how it looks. As this one was slightly yellowed, but free from any major scratches or damage, I wanted to gauge the result. See what you think later on at the grand reveal. As the post that held the suspension strip in place had snapped off, I have to glue it back in place. More glue is needed to attach the wheels to the axles. I'm very pleased with how these turned out. The old wheels I've decided to revitalise anyway, which I'll show at the closing credits fitted to the car. I can now fit my custom wheels underneath the re-glued metal suspension clip. So here are all the parts and pieces needed to reassemble this Ford Merkur Sierra XR4Ti XR4i. I first must fit the rear spoiler, which has been washed in Citadel. Following that comes the window piece that has been polished with Autosol, Astonish and Humbrol gloss. Then comes the fresher washed plastic interior. And lastly the base piece, which has also been revitalised with Citadel. It secures with a screw at the front and a tongue and slot at the back. This is how my MC Toy Ford Sierra XR4i, badged as a Merkur XR4Ti, looked to begin with. It was in bad shape. The innards were a total mess, yet it held form and hadn't disintegrated or broken as much as could have been expected. The worst that could be seen on the exterior were the broken wheel arches. But this made for a great 80s throwback project that could be mutually shared with both sides of the Atlantic. And here it is now. The black paint always looked best on the XR4 because it disguised the chunky black plastic bumpers that surround it. The red reflector tape breaks up that sheer black and gives it a nice focal point. That alongside the wheels, which I adore. A touch of colour joined the rear with the tail lights and Ford badge. The glass cleaned up well, and I did little with the interior other than wash it. All in all, I'm really pleased with this custom project. It's not perfect, as this MC Toy example nor the Matchbox versions are perfect in the first place, but it certainly feels good to restore this one, considering the way it was. Okay, so please leave a like, leave a comment, and don't leave before subscribing. Head on over to my Instagram to keep up with the latest from me, but all that leaves me to say is thanks for watching, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.